So we have a very interesting and diverse technology panel here today. I'm just going to do some brief intros on some of my panelists. And I'm going to abbreviate, with all due respect, some of your bios. Aaron Brody is an accomplished builder, developer, and lender in New York with 2 decades of experience in the middle market sector. Noticing the inefficiencies of construction and development, Eric launched Annex Real Estate Partners and Annex Ventures, an early-stage PropTech investment fund focused on identifying and testing technologies that impact the urban landscape. Thank you, Aaron. Mario Gastambidi. Mario, oh, there you go. Mario Gastambidi is the Senior Managing Director of LeftRack. He is the head of multifamily, and he oversees the group's property management, leasing, and marketing teams for a portfolio of more than 20,000 units in New York, New Jersey, South Florida, and the West Coast. Mario is very passionate about PropTech, and we welcome him here today. James Hanna.
Over here.
Hey, sorry, I didn't see you on the end. Leads the U.S. business for Parity and HVA Optimization as a service company focused on multifamily residential buildings and hotels. He's been concentrating on the acceleration of adoption of clean energy, which I think is something that everybody here is focused on lately. And Robert Morgenstern. Where's Robert? Oh, sorry. Hey, so Robert is the co-founder and CEO of the entire Canvas family of companies. He oversees all investment and strategic operations at Canvas. He spent 25 years in real estate as a serial entrepreneur, acquiring, operating, and managing several thousand units and nearly $1 billion of New York City multifamily real estate.
Would you start with 07?
John Rusk is the founder of ProSentry, a company devoted to stopping water leaks and other critical issues in multifamily dwellings as soon as possible while improving the tenant experience. So with that, I'm going to lead into our first question, which I think is a broad one, but a good way for everybody to dive in. So question number 1, and anybody can weigh in at any time, and feel free to fire your questions to me to handle to the panel. So everyone knows that technology is advancing exponentially. So to attempt to adopt or even look at a large portion of the platforms is like drinking essentially from a fire hose. So how do you all look at what's out there? And more importantly, how do you decide and triage what is worthy of a deep dive and potentially adoption? So who would like to start?
I would. No, I think it's all through the lens at which you sit. So, where we are as an owner operator of multifamily, as well as a third party provider, we're looking at it through the lens of where do we want the tenant experience to be and where do we want the client experience to be. And we look at the tenant as a customer, owner operator, or lender, or investment partner as the client, and they're disparate solutions, and you have to look through the same lens. So where you are, we see a new product, service, or application, 3 or 4 a day, and we'll meet 2 or 3 vendors a week. And we know what we have, we know what we do well. There are definitely pieces of the puzzle we're always looking to solve and try to find. But if you hear of a new idea and you don't know where it fits into what you already have, you're just going to run yourself ragged trying to understand what everything is. So as far as like meeting new solutions, it has to solve a very specific pain point for either the tenant that's going to, keep retention up, drive revenue up, for our client or vendors to bring revenue down. Like, we're not in the part of a cycle where people are looking at solutions that, might save somebody a little time or add a couple of, nice images to an app. Like, there needs to be a real ROI day one, dollar one for, something that we're doing directly. There's no kind of ancillary fund. So it has to solve an immediate problem.
Thank you. Who else wanted to answer as well?
So, how many people here drive an SUV? So we don't drive an SUV because it gets us to the supermarket. Any car kind of does that. We drive an SUV because twice a year it snows in New York, and once a year we have to move our mother-in-law's dresser. Sooner or later, we're going to need a solution. And I think part of looking at tech is figuring out whether this solution is going to, whether or not that solution, thanks. Whether or not that solution is we're going to regret in the future because it doesn't do everything that we want. And I think that's part of what you're talking about. You're looking at a technology and you're saying, I don't know if this makes sense. So I think part of, as we look at anything, whether it makes sense, is, does it make sense yet? And do I have some more time to decide? Kind of like getting married. At what point do we pull the trigger? And so I think right now on things like building monitoring, which our company is involved in, I think that moment's coming right now because we can look at things like water leak detection, but we also have on our same platform and other integrated platform, a lot of other solutions that can be added in the future. So I think like the SUV, as we're looking at this fire hose of possible things, we might pick the things that we need today, but we also need platforms that allow us to add other things we might need, but on that same platform in the future.
Okay, so I have one just quick follow-up question, which you may add to. So what I find when we are in slightly different platform, but when we're encountering technological solutions, many times there's an overlap of what it is that everybody provides, but nobody is the one-stop and trying to encompass, like, or addressing everything that you may need down the road. How do you triage that?
You know, I would just go back as first, when looking at technology, you have to believe the thesis, and everyone on this stage does. Does technology give you a millimeter and millisecond advantage in the real estate space? And if the answer is yes, and you're just confused as to how technology is supposed to impact, then you go to what Robert's saying is, this is much like, and I always say it, like construction and development. You can't go to school, get out of school, and have a degree in development. There's no such thing. You actually have to experience it. So if you already believe in the thesis that technology can help you, you're going to have to take some time and you're going to have to dive in to the different aspects of it. And that's where Robert's comment comes in. What lens are you looking at it? Are you an operator trying to create more efficiency? Are you a builder trying to get more transparency in the field? Are you a title insurance, right? How are you looking at it? And what advantage are you looking for within that technology? How about a marketing strategy? I don't know. You have to look at it, and then you can now operate and look at those technologies that are out there in order to create those efficiencies. You're going to have to research them because, as they were also saying, there's some point solutions. They're not driving a specific response or answer. As multifamily, and Mario will tell you, there's no such thing as a single solution. Is it an application? How does that application talk to the IoT? How does that IoT speak to the existing hardware? How does the software that's supposed to be the application now operate so that those things function? There's no one out there that's going to teach you that. And then you say, oh, there's integrators. Well, integrators are selling specific products. You're going to have to take some time out to understand how they're supposed to be applied because you, the quote unquote developer, will be responsible for that technology solution.
So
Yeah,
just to follow up on that. So look, technology is hard. This is still a pretty inefficient industry. And for us, a lot of what we think about is how do we make ourselves more efficient? How do we deliver better service? When I started 16 years ago, I remember going up to a person who was in charge of renewals for a large portfolio in the boroughs. And I asked her how she was tracking our response rate to the renewal offers. She went down into a file cabinet, pulled out a piece of paper, which she had taped together, unrolled it, and then I saw a series of hash marks, and that's how she was tracking. So thankfully, we've come a long way from then. But, you know, to echo, I think what has been said, number one, you have to decide, you have to pick a lane, and the lane is what is the problem that you're trying to solve for, while also realizing and not to fall into the trap of having too many single problem solutions. So that's a challenge that we face, right? Not a week goes by that someone comes to you and says, I have a great solution for this thing or for this one thing. But then I look at the spider web of tech that we are cobbling together, and it's become a rigmarole. I'm jumping in and out of systems. I'm jumping in and out of reports. You know, the amount of data that we're having to like cobble together to get all these things to talk, it can be daunting. And you know, sometimes you have to take a step back and I think look at your organization, whatever your role is. Are you a developer? Are you an operator? Are you an owner? And really focus on what is the most high value impact that you're trying to bring, and then go with that lane first. I have been guilty in the past of trying too many things at the same time, and then our efforts get diluted. The efficacy of the solution gets diluted, and then now you're just burdened with a new software cost, but you're not getting everything out of it. So sometimes you got to go slower to go fast, and I think it's really picking the lane of what's going to have the most impact.
Yeah. So I have one question just as a follow-up to that, which may, so you just alluded to the fact that somebody went into a file cabinet and took out a piece of paper, which Mr. Lefrak himself may have started on his desk. So the question is, how often are you looking at what you're doing? Are you, is anybody saying, we've been doing this for 11 years and because we do that all the time. Nobody should be doing anything they've done for 11 years today. So the question is, how often do you look at it subject to the issues and the logistical difficulty of going through everything you all just said about analyzing adoption and implementation? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say as also a provider of solution, we in 2019 into 20 through COVID built a software that's reading our accounting solution, which is a kind of a market leader in accounting that we don't need to name and as generally challenging to pull business intelligence out of it. So we leaned into the leasing and revenue side and understanding trade outs and understanding retention, which this accounting software doesn't actually track retention. It's not a report. It doesn't exist. So for us, that was the most important thing for us to solve. And to your point, I've now done, I don't know, hundreds of demos of this, and overwhelmingly, especially the larger, especially with affordable, are tracking renewals, responses. Maybe they're off of a pen and paper, but like everybody's doing it the same way. So you should, I guess, feel good that you've moved off of that, but B, the solution has to, solve something that is immediate and direct. But there's, the biggest challenge for us and to the timing, it's sort of weekly in a division, right? So the leasing team that we work with, when we get done with whatever we need to on the leasing side, there's inevitably a top of funnel AI solution for CRM that's solving this. There's, a guy outside that may be able to solve our kind of, keyless entry issue that we're trying to figure out. Like there's always something coming up. So inevitably I like it. So I'm talking about it and listening to it. But the one point to add that I think needs to be made is, when you're deciding whoever is going to say yes, and whoever's going to make this buy side is going to flow down to somebody who's the user. And the person tasked with saying yes and saying, okay, we're going to use this, whoever the user of that is, whether it's property manager, leasing agent, or whomever, if you don't have buy-in, then you've got software costs and just banging your head against the wall of somebody who probably didn't go to the end user to find out why you need the solution in the first place. And the end user buy-in, whether that be a tenant or a property manager, needs to be kind of top of mind when you're picking a solution.
Yeah, and I think I just, add on to that. You hear a lot from real estate operators. How do we know if we're getting the value we expected or getting any value out of this technology solution? And I think what, you started to see out there is technology companies, service providers are the ones that need to be the one to measure, quantify, and communicate the value that they're providing. Because I think we're, just heard on the last, panel, you sort of been a theme in the real estate industry for the past little while here. People are looking very closely at their costs, right? And I think if you can't demonstrate the value that you're providing in a metric that is useful for your customer, you're in a really tough spot. So I think, I know it's something that we do at Parity. I know it's something that a lot of other companies do, but really focus on what's your value, report on it, make sure that your customers understand it. And I think that's a good evolution that we're seeing in the technology space.
Look, we at Annex, we look at using this software in proprietary to our business to create an advantage. And there's two things that we believe. So one is tech is not a binary solution. It's not you did it this way or you did it that way. It's giving you millimeters and milliseconds of advantage. And in a market where everything is getting more and more efficient, you're looking for that advantage. And I think it's a perception. It's not supposed to all of a sudden change everything that you do. It's an incremental change. I think the second thing that Robert said, and also my colleague James said, that's really, really relevant is business intelligence. If you view the technological solution as actually has to translate to the way in which you operate to give you actionable items, that's a tech you want to implement. So you had stated getting actual business intelligence from accounting. Anyone out there that's looking at accounting software, if you're not getting that information within a day, 2 days at the end of the month so that you can react to the forward-facing month, why do you have it, right? And the incumbent out there that's dealing with multifamily isn't able to do that. But I believe that's what you're stating. Some of the software that you're working with is able, right? Because if you can now react, if the information you can get comes so much faster to have a reaction, that is an incremental change from what we were doing in the past.
So I don't know if anybody wanted to add any more, but if not, I wanted to shift to our second question, which is kind of a completely different view. And I think everybody here is going to come at it from a different perspective because you all touched the segment in a different place. But in an increasingly competitive environment, how do we create or use tech to create an experience, whatever it is that you all do? So I think everybody may want to weigh in here. So
I think when we think about the experience, it starts with how do we make it easier for our residents to interact with us, right? 2013, when we went live with our major accounting software that won't be named and their portal, right? Everything was about I can check my rent bill online and I can enter a work order. And that was like, oh, that's great, right? Before they used to go to the super's office and put in a work ticket, and they had to wait for the mail. Obviously, things have evolved. One of the greatest challenges that we have is how much yet how little residents want to communicate with us. Meaning, newer residents, they don't placing a phone call. Are you kidding me? They want to text you, and it's incredible. It's interesting that you text with them as prospects, you don't text with them as residents, right? But so you really have to figure out how to meet people where they are. And it's about using technology to create connections between your residents, to create a sense of community. Those are huge drivers of retention for us, right? Creating situations where people can meet and, you know, get around a resident lounge or an outside space to watch a game or a book club or whatever it is. So we think about tech both on how do we service them better, but more importantly, how do we increase their satisfaction about living in our communities?
So let's take a step back, right? All of the technology out there is going under an underlying thesis, and that is that multifamily is driving towards hospitality, right? You see it in hotels where they were moving towards office, where if you go to the Ace Hotel on ground floor, they're giving you coffee and free Wi-Fi. So how do you create a branded experience? You created a branded experience by creating as much binary touch points as you can with your consumer. What's their interaction with the manager? What's their interaction with the superintendent? Do they have leaks, right? If you can create that experience and you can have someone stay in your asset a week, a month, a year longer, it's increasing your bottom line and your NOI, right? But what about in a different perspective? Developers, we raise capital by syndicating it. People say it's not transparent. What the hell do we know is happening in the field each day? So maybe that experience is to the investor. Hey, you don't have to call me because I'm busy building your asset. Go to your portal, take a look. Here's images of what's happening on the site. Here's information as to how the critical path is being achieved. And here's how we're spending your money. So it really just depends. Can you use technology to assist that experience? And again, you just have to look at what the overall trends are. And it's not tech that's creating it. It's still solving a normal real estate problem. It's just getting more data and information faster to you without having to bother us to know what's happening with your asset.
So I think there's a lot of talk about the concept of multifamily as hospitality. I think it winds up, maybe we talked about it a year ago on this panel, but like in the end, the reality is there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 logins that are disparate and separate for the tenant and a similar number for the owner of a property. And it's not close, right? Like you're from what you're describing as a tenant experience, and there are plenty of solutions for that, versus access control, versus a work order, versus that community. But then as you get back down to local law 97 and HPD registrations and violations and clearing of those and the financial reporting and how do you pull the BI on which plumber is performing which service at which time for how long. And there is no kind of grand solution, but you're absolutely right that from the moment a prospect sees a marketing ad until they leave or stay on that renewal that's above market because you did all of these things A to Z, the goal is retention, whether it's because they had a better social experience with their tenants, which is huge, or they had a better interaction or no interaction with the managing agent because they had a work order, they took a picture, they came home, it was done, they found out it was done, they got their survey, they said yes, great, like the little interaction is possible. All of it sort of feeds into how as owner, or in our case, you know, third-party property manager, leasing, construction, compliance, how can we create a passive investment for an owner? And the technology may be dashboard views into what is due, when is it due, did it get done, so I don't have to ping the email of the property manager to find out what's going on with my boiler registration, just as easily as, oh, I've had 15 buildings with you, which plumber fixed what faster because I have an issue. Now, maybe people want nothing to do with looking through the plumber's invoices and finding it out, but our ability as owner operator or a manager to provide a report that says, here's what's happened in your building, here's why it's better, as opposed to look through the GL of the last 7 months financial reports that are 90-page PDFs that you can't search or look or pull any business intelligence out of it. So for us, it sort of goes all the way kind of top down from how do you report up to investors and lenders? A lot of that's compliance financial reporting, which is a much more challenging and further away from where we need to be. And then the tenant experience and the communication, which is all about, for us, from lead prospect, which is an AI solution for a CRM, so that the tenant or prospective tenant that wants to see apartment gets an immediate response. They come in, they see it, and then you're leased with no kind of movement outside of our funnel. And then the experience and the transition to operations, along with all that communication of how they can hang out with their friends or book a room or whatever that is. There's countless providers, and the putting of it together, it's going to be really, really hard unless you're building your own app that's plugging and playing all of these different places, because the individual vendors that come say, we only need this one app, and their perspective is whatever it is, water, security, building compliance. Like, nobody has a solution. So I think it will likely be owner operators that are willing to put this in for your own app. Maybe it's related, maybe it's whoever that is, that will make it cohesive in the way that hospitality does. It's rare that it would be sort of an outside provider that can solve all the pain points and really even know what
Just so you know, that a guy built his own system in Jersey City. I forget the name of the company. It'll come to me at the end, but built it all himself to get that data.
Mhm.
But he spent
which, by the way,
36
could be-
engineers.
It could be performance, which
Mm.
I mean, that might be the key to all this. The performance of the property is great. Retention's nice, but the data of who's in your building, where do they work, how long are their commutes, where do they spend their money, the ability to pay their rent online, but also maybe buy coffee. All of the data that's within the property when they're living there for 12 months might be more valuable than a better retention or a better renewal. And that's the real sort of,
It's the Tesla of the rental building. How do you get the binary data in order to make decisions?
So I'm going to move on to.
So let's talk. That was a lot.
Yeah.
And that gave me so much adjective because
problem.
there's so
I'm
many
sorry.
pieces all at once.
Flood scripting notes.
But there are a lot of pieces. And I think the question is largely about how do we use tech to make an experience? And I think, and I see Mark Kotler in the room from First Service, we're helping them right now make an experience for their tenants, which is to make it super simple by using robots to do the stuff that the rest of us don't want to do. I don't want to experience technology. We experience so much of it. I don't want technology really interacting with me, but I do want technology looking under my sink every 10 seconds to make sure there's not a leak. I want technology sitting with my mother, making sure she hasn't left the stove on. And if there's a gas leak, let technology call the super and get them to turn it off right away. So technology are robots that can make our life much more simple. And I think that's really where we can go with technology so that then in the live interaction part, we can enjoy it. And that's why our company, when there is an emergency, it's a live human who's calling the building and saying there's a leak upstairs. So it's using robots to do the things we don't want to do, and then using humans for the part that we really do want to experience with them as tenants.
And from a tenant point of view, it sounds like you want to create an experience when it's beneficial, and you want there to be an absence of an experience otherwise.
Right. We want to give the building manager knowledge that that fan coil unit is leaking before the tenant ever knew about it. We want to let them know before it's gone through 4 floors and they're saying, why don't you know this? We want to give the building the ability, because we have the robots for them, to say, we know this ahead of time. We're in there. We already took care of it. Geez, Mrs. Jones, you came home tonight. We were in your building today because you actually had a leak, but it's already taken care of. Everything's fine.
And I would just add to that, I mean, the other side of that too is using technology to get more out of your staff. I mean, just to get back to what the sort of heart of the panel is about, you know, automation, I think we're just at the very beginning of what automation can do in buildings. And I think the low hanging fruit are some of the back of house building systems, sort of more mundane tinkering and day-to-day operations of building systems. You know, get your property staff out of that day-to-day so they can focus more on service tickets. They can focus more on that community building within these communities that really leads to that retention above market rates or rent rates that everyone's driving at. And I think that's really the low hanging fruit where there's technologies today that can help you do that.
So now I'm going to switch to, let's not talk about what we're doing right now, but let's talk about what we want to do. So what are the 5 unsolved problems? And not everybody may have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, but at least throw out a couple unsolved problems that tech will address. And let's start with James on this side.
Yeah, so maybe, we'll do a problem that's being addressed or in progress. I think for a long time, and, again, I focus more on building operations, so I'll stick with what I know. But, this being a multifamily conference, for a long time, you had technology companies and technology providers that developed a solution that was specific to a different asset class. So think about, building management systems for commercial office or corporate real estate that are trying to be shoehorned into a multifamily application. And I think we're at the sort of early innings of seeing technology providers really start to build solutions that are asset class specific as the prop tech industry is really growing, as you're seeing lots and lots of VC and private equity money coming in to fund these companies. There's a lot more ability to create solutions that are specific to different asset classes, right? Because the way that you are going to operate a building, the type of tenants that you have, the type of issues that you have is very different, obviously, in an apartment building versus an office building. It's even different from an affordable housing building to a market rate building. So I think, what the technology industry has not done a good job of doing historically is having asset specific solutions. But I think that that's in progress, and there's some good efforts being made there.
I have 5 solutions. 5 problems I think many people in this room have, and out there we actually have a table with these 5 solutions. Number 1, unsolved problems. Stop water leaks from damaging more than one apartment and drastically reduce the damage. Problem 2, stop the fire department from turning off gas to buildings because of a leaky stove. Number 3, allow buildings with a history of water leaks to get insurance. That's a huge problem right now. The insurance company does not want to insure your building if it's got a history of water leaks, but the technology is sitting on our table that will let the insurance company now judge you a premium building. Identify when people are smoking in apartments and make a record immediately, and allow landlords to charge for water usage in existing buildings cost effectively. 5 problems tech can solve right now.
All with you.
Oh, funny,
How
but
convenient.
yes, easy.
Well, I don't know if you need his help, but if not, Robert, what you say?
I gave this a bit less thought. But I would say for me, and looking through a New York angle of it, it's real revenue management. And I don't know if there's revenue management guys, but generally there's 2 major national options that are out there in New York. They don't function, and effectively they're looking at all leases signed to determine where the market's moving, which if 50% of your units in the housing stock are regulated, some are in 2-unit walk-ups and some are in 300-unit fully amenitized buildings, that's not really going to give you a great driver, along with the manual creation of amenities or other things that move price, where the actual transactions and those details should move price, but it's incredibly nuanced when you start thinking about views and where those things change. There's a couple of the best leasing brokers in the city in this room, and their skill to price apartments is what leads. I don't think New York's getting to a place where people should turn on a revenue management software and just let it price, because I've looked at buildings in 2022 when, our trade outs were 70 and 80%, and we were seeing revenue management price things down in June because of no reason at all. So you need a solution, probably all encompassing, that has it AI front end that could help take in all the information of every listing with view and unit and size and amenities, to then look at the intensity and direction of the supply of the market, neighborhood wise and pricing of those markets to then really be able to assist in pricing outside of just looking at the individual building and what's been on the market over the last week or two, and where that's moved. And we're trying, but a long way off from solving it. But I think that's kind of the piece that our software does a very manual job after pulling in as much information as it can. But I think that's kind of the, on the revenue side, the holy grail of what's not solved, but 12 to 18 months from now probably is. I only have one. That was it.
Just to go off of that, what's interesting is the reason that people are so fascinated by AI and these large data set and language models is that they can take a lot more variability than any of our human brains can to come up with then a solution or an answer to what Robert is saying. So that should be fascinating in the next 12 to 18 months if you can create sort of a algorithmic model that can start to answer some of these questions. I mean, I think tech needs to answer a bunch of questions. I think the first one is one solution that technology can provide to anyone in this room that's selling any type of service, and it doesn't really need to be real estate or anything, is sort of your digital marketing and funnel and the communication with those that are out there and how you communicate with them daily. We used to have these models of massive real estate firms with tons and tons of people that were really out there just making phone calls. If that's what you're still doing, there's a huge solution out there for you, and that's something that tech can provide. I think when we look at these technologies, you have to realize that there's a ton of water gaps, what we call, or an air gap, where you can't have a pipe that goes right into New York City system. There has to be a gap within it. So I agree that there should be a solution that goes from the beginning of whatever your real estate, life cycle is to whatever the end is. And we don't have that yet. So technology is trying to solve for workflow optimization. I think that that's something that will be coming out in the next few years. Up here is a mostly a multifamily challenge. So sort of keep it into that realm. I think that other sensor technology, as my colleague is saying, is going to start to be out there, and you'll see a lot more sensors just in use and occupancy and giving you data on how your building is actually being used. Those are some of the things that I see on the horizon.
So I don't have 5, but I have 2. The 2 for us are communication and business intelligence. Those are probably our 2 critical priorities. Communication, there's too much communication that's happening right now via email, via attachments, via reports. It's so difficult to sometimes figure out what is communication that you have to be on versus communication where you're just one of the dreaded CCs or BCCs. And God forbid you get into those chains of got it, will do, me too. And you just want to throw your laptop out the window. Our windows don't open, so we can't. So that's a big one. And we've been working with a company that's kind of developed a Slack for real estate that we're pretty excited about, because there's certain communication, internal communication with vendors that doesn't belong in email. It makes for much more efficient collaboration. It's quicker, and ultimately time is probably our most precious commodity, particularly in organizations like mine where we run very lean in terms of headcount. And then business intelligence, I think because of the challenge of trying to cobble together all these solutions to try to build a holistic picture of how you're performing, whether it's on the revenue side, on the OpEx side, that's an area where we're spending a lot of time thinking through and figuring out what the right solution is. We've attempted several times to build something in-house, and it hasn't really worked because we're not software developers, right? We're really good operators. So we're moving away from that and just kind of talking to a couple of solutions and finding the right one that can scale for our needs as a private owner who manages their own stuff and has a very particular view of how we want to manage. We're not trying to print numbers for a quarterly report or, sell in 5 years. So we're very much about the long term and how we make our buildings produce the most cash flow possible. So those are the 2 big things that we're thinking about.
I met both of them.
Great.
I met those companies.
Mm-hmm.
So we have less than 5 minutes. I want to get to our question 4, and then we have a few questions that have also come in from the audience. So, and we'll go in order. We'll start with James, but what is your prop tech why? And, it's going to vary obviously with each of you, but what are your goals and your horizons? And I think we alluded to this earlier, is it measurable or not?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a technology provider, I think, for us, we're really focused on how do we get buildings to interact with the grid in a really efficient way, and how do we get buildings to use the minimum amount of utilities necessary to meet the real-time demand and future demand for heating, cooling, and ventilation in a building. And I think we're just at the very beginning of what you can do there, because, as one of the other panelists alluded to, when you start to get into predictive algorithms, when you start to be able to predict the demand for any given system within a building in the future, there's a lot of possibilities for what you can do, right? Not just in terms of, controlling what you can control within the building, but also for generating revenue, also for, exploring all these new opportunities that are coming into play as the energy system just generally is transitioning from sort of base load power to more renewable, intermittent sorts of power that is going to make it necessary for buildings to be much more dynamic in the way that they interact with the grid. So I think they were just at the very, very early innings of what that's going to look like and what sort of opportunities will exist for the real estate community as that unfolds over the next 5, 10 plus years.
John?
I think there's going to be incredibly complex systems like Parity that uses predictive algorithms. And we're looking simply to be the ubiquitous system for kind of everything else that's simple. Basically, catching water leaks, oil leaks, gas leaks, catching mice, catching smokers, and metering for water. Kind of simple things that everybody needs. And we're trying to be the system kind of across the country and across North and South America that just uses it for simple things, basically for simple needs for buildings, that interacts with the realities of the staff that work in most buildings.
Okay, Robert?
Yeah, so I guess the why, I guess, starts with the who and where I sit. So as a kind of CEO of a firm that has reporting with or reports with accounting folk and property management operations, construction, compliance, and leasing, we're looking at each and how the technology fits in with the kind of holy grail of, can we solve the entire life cycle of the tenant, but also the life cycle of an investment, and make it cohesive up and down the chain. And as we have sort of a PropCo, OpCo business and looking at individual other companies as potential fits for us, how can the scale that we're trying to get to, which, it only works with the right technology, what is the systems and what would that look like if 2,000 units goes to 20,000 units, and what breaks first and how can you solve it? We aren't LaFrac, but are aiming for scale. And, when you think about M&A, and all of those different divisions and where that would come through, it kind of bends the brain a little bit in trying to figure it out. But the why is just as Eric said a couple of times, the efficiency to save. I don't think it's millimeters, it's miles. Like, if you get it right, given where people in the industry are, not only is it headcount, but it's millions of dollars of NOI, retention, higher rents, as well as, payroll for an organization.
I have 1 minute, so let's try. I wanted to get everybody.
I think my why is quite simple. I always look at what the obvious is. Look at every other industry out there that is embracing technology, and for some reason, real estate is a laggard industry. If you can embrace the technology, it will create an advantage. And by the time the others figure it out, it was written in a book called Innovator's Dilemma, it will already be too late. So everyone in this room is wanting to actually learn about it is probably the smartest people in our industry today, because it will be an advantage, and it could be miles or millimeters or milliseconds, but by the time you figure it out, I hope I'm gone.
So for us, I think it's about efficiency and speed, how we can do more with same, how we can make our staff more efficient in the decision-making and the service that they deliver, right? I think, and then for us, it's speed. It's the ability to react quickly to changing market conditions on our pricing, on our marketing, and then speed in our service delivery in terms of, attending to our residents' needs.
So I don't know if we have the opportunity to go over by a little bit.
Maybe one question, yeah.
Okay, so take one, and this is a large question, but where is AI heading? And I think that's kind of a large thing. So we'll try and take little bites, perhaps, just to try and it's a whole nother panel in and of itself.
I cede my time to Eric.
Where is AI heading? AI is a large language model today, which means that first and foremost, why is AI relevant? It's relevant because you feel like a human is talking back to you. So let's just start with why it got so incredible today. It's been around for a while. What it does is it's going to take a ton of variability that you have in whatever business that you have and then pump back out business intelligence to you in a format that you'll be able to absorb and use. So to me, I think that AI will be just a place where you're going to go, where you're going to be, remember, and it's the input of your own data. I think that's what's so relevant, which is why AI may work a lot better for his organization than mine, which is smaller. You need a massive data set, and then you can start communicating with that as if you were speaking to a human to get your business intelligence in order to make different, different actions or however you want to use that data.
I think we could talk probably for another hour easily. So I want to say thank you, everyone, for the thoughtful contributions, and thanks for listening.